invite you to sit down so we can get started. I'll give you a minute. Welcome. I just wanted to take a moment. I'm Rachel Smith. I head loyalty and events here at Sotheby's, and thank you to all of you that have been here all day, and to the people just joining us. You're in for a treat. Also, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, feel free to send comments and questions for Michael and David. I wanted to take a moment just now to set the stage for what you're about to listen to, and that pun is every bit intended because what we're talking about is setting a stage, creating a scene, and talking about how the design of a space can have a profound effect on one's experience. Michael and David will be discussing this, whether it be the set design for a play, the stage design for an arena rock concert, or even an exhibition at the auction house. There is the need to find the theater, the drama of the play, the show, or the property, and work in harmony with that, ultimately elevating the whole. So how did all this happen? Well, when this sale came together, the 5 different sales of Americana Week, we realized we needed a special moment. So Sotheby's reached out to David Korins and invited him to be the creative director. Hold on 1 second. See, I'm the nervous one, you guys, not you. To serve as the creative director of the exhibition, and in an effort to illuminate the history, the rarity, and the profound impact this property continues to have on everything from modern-day aesthetics to culture and politics. Working with David and actualizing his vision for this exhibition also speaks to the missive of Sotheby's to contribute to an ever-evolving dialogue about the past and the future. Fresh off a Tony nomination for the design of the Hamilton set, David came to Sotheby's and applied his practice of an almost scientific attention to detail and history with his fearless creative vision. David used the colors of the American flag and incorporated symbolism and metaphor into his design. Now, to delve further into this vision behind the exhibition, as well as David's creative process as a whole, we are thrilled to have Michael Paulson here. Michael is the theater reporter for the New York Times and also a Pulitzer Prize-winning author as part of the 2003 Boston Globe church sex abuse scandal, and has written a book called Betrayal: The Crisis of the Catholic Church. It is an honor to have you here, Michael Paulson and David Korins, and I turn it over to you for this conversation. And please feel free to ask questions. Thank you.
Great. Hello, and thanks to all of you for being here and to all of you watching us on Facebook. So David, you've been spending the last couple years of your life with Alexander Hamilton.
Personally.
Sotheby's calls you up and gives you this opportunity, and you get to look at these letters. What were you looking for as you paged through them?
Well, Sotheby's didn't call. David Goodman called. David is a longtime collaborator and friend, and he is a really interesting character. He kind of toes the line between big business and important institutions and crazy, wild, artistic ideas. And we've done some wild things in the past. We made a pop-up club experience. We did something honoring the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Movement. We've looked at the Knicks halftime show. We've done all sorts of weird things. So when he called me, I thought he was just trying to grab anyone that was involved with Hamilton, just to try and help sell these letters. And I said, why me? As I kind of ask with every single project that I work on, why me? What do I have to offer? Why not an architecture firm? Why not a different kind of designer? And he said, come in and take a look at the stuff. So I wasn't really looking for something in particular. I was just kind of trusting David. When I saw, the first thing I saw was not the Hamilton letters. I saw some of the 1,300 individual pieces, and I was 3 of which we're interacting with right now. That's the weird thing about an auction house as opposed to a gallery or something else, is you can come up and they encourage you to touch it and feel it and flip it upside down. We're not going to do any of that today. But I was really struck by the unbelievable craftsmanship of the pieces and how, in a country struggling to figure out what it is that we make right now, literally make, every single one of these pieces was handmade and incredible. And so then I saw the Hamilton letters. And I had, you know, through my research in working on the show Hamilton, seen a lot of the letters, you know, printouts or in books and manuscripts and documents, and certainly read a lot of the words. And I was really and truly blown away by the drama. It's different than you would imagine, and I would encourage everyone after this thing to go down to the second floor and look at these pieces. It's weird to think that tomorrow they will all be owned by someone else, and I don't know, some Russian czar or someone in this room is going to own them and keep them in their living room or wherever. But we might never see these things again. And they're incredible. You can see in the writing, you can see the intention, you can see with the wax seal. I mean, I spend my day and a lot of my life faking stuff, making fake pieces of furniture, making manuscripts and tea staining them, and, you know, pulling the edges and, you know, doing things to make them feel real. And these are the real things. And I was really kind of blown away by the power of these things. And you know, because you had said I had spent so much time with these characters and these men and women, that I just felt closer, and it filled in a little of the backstory that I've been wondering about, but it was a wow.
Yeah. I know you've worked with Gagosian and other galleries before. How is designing for a gallery different from designing for performance?
Well, my short answer is it's not different at all. And I think that there are some people in my office here, thank you for coming, and thank you all for coming too. There are some people in my office here who think we should find a lane and stick with it. And I, from 40,000 feet above sea level, look down at the process of designing or creating something, and it is the exact same. Whether you're working with Gagosian on a gallery experience, or a restaurateur, or a pop star, or Lin-Manuel Miranda and Ron Chernow, and thanks for coming, Ron, or you know, Tommy Kail, or a director, it's the same. You know, you have an ultimate vision. It's not my vision, it's their vision. They're the ones kind of making the work, and they say, you know, for Sotheby's, they want it to be accessible, they want it to be clear, they want you to get lost and also know where you are. They want you to be able to touch and feel things. That is one of the distinctions. We don't necessarily want people to come up onto the Hamilton set on Broadway and touch and feel things. So there are little nuances that are different, but the ultimate goal is there is a client, in this case it's Sotheby's, and they want to make you feel a certain way. And so I liken my job to one of a therapist. Yes.
Right.
Perfect.
Reenacting the duel.
One of a therapist, you know, where I sit and I say, like, what is it that you want? And then I kind of use all of the tools that I have at my disposal, whether it is line, architecture, color, scale, proportion, whatever it is, at like Jedi mind tricking people into thinking the way that my client wants them to feel.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. So you come here, you know you have a certain number of objects and a certain number of square feet. How do you start to think about what you want to do?
Right. I mean, I have no idea how to help people sell things. Right. So that right away I say, who are the experts that are going to help me wrestle this thing down to the ground? And there are many, and they're extraordinary. And if you get time to talk to them, you should. They're around and they're incredibly knowledgeable. So I sort of say, like, I'm trying to figure out the consumer journey. Like, who is the person that's coming to Sotheby's, and what do we want them to feel when they walk through the door? And my original idea was to wrap the building. It's all the way on York Avenue. How the hell would you even get here? How do you even know about it? How do you know it's happening? And I thought if we could wrap the building sort of Jean-Claude and Christo style with a huge American flag, and we went very far down the road. I did renderings, people in my office did renderings, helped me be able to articulate to them what I had wanted to do, because I was trying to find a unifying kind of portal into the experience. You schlepped all the way up here, now you got to walk through the door, and how could I possibly create an experience out of it? We couldn't afford it, there wasn't enough time, we couldn't permit it, and it actually looked weird. The renderings were not great, not the execution of the renderings, but the idea wasn't great. And so Rachel, who introduced us, she spoke a little bit about the idea. The idea that I tried to do was figure out a way to take the 5 big sales that are happening here and color code them, right? It sounds simple, it's not that simple, but color code them so that when you walk through the experience, you can see the plinths and the tops of things are color-coded. It helps you understand that they are all part of one sail. And then I tried to make an abstract experience of the American flag. I took the idea of wrapping the building, and then I moved it inside because it's a really sprawling, we're on the 7th floor, right? It's a really sprawling physical plant, and I wanted to somehow make the building vertically feel connected. So the entire experience as you went up the escalators, if any of you came up the escalators, you saw all those strings, that kind of, that abstract sculpture. It was a version of a piece of fabric or an American flag is only as strong as an individual thread. A sail is only as strong as an individual object in the sail. The country is only as strong as an individual member in the country. No one thing is more important, and so it was an abstract representation of that. Does that make sense?
It does. There's a flag made of steel.
Yes.
How did that come about?
I have no idea. I think that flag made of steel was made by the steel sponsor, who came on and very generously helped pay for this entire exhibition, which is, you know, an incredibly ambitious exhibition.
Right. So do you think of yourself as an artist or an architect, or how is it that you design, that you think about what you do?
I guess I think of myself differently at different parts of the process. When someone approaches me early on, I think of myself as a co-director, co-writer, co-restaurateur, co-creator. But I think you have to have a great audience barometer. When I am working on I don't think of myself as an architect, I think, because people who go to architecture school and actually get that degree are architects. I work alongside architects, and I'm not necessarily a director or any of those other things I said, but I play one on TV very successfully often. I've never really tried to put myself specifically in one bucket, and I think that's what helps. But the most important bucket, I think, is that audience barometer. You have to put yourself in the position of the person who is going to interact with the thing that you're making. There are a lot of people who create things, and I work with these people all the time, and they're lovely and well-meaning people, but they say to me in the theater, this moment is going to be extraordinary. Oh my God, when they see this thing, it's going to be amazing. And then you watch the audience and they don't get it at all. They shut down, they don't feel it, and I think of myself as someone who has a really pretty good audience barometer. I can, in my mind's eye, imagine the experience of that restaurant, going there and sitting down in that booth and trying to order a meal, or at that rock concert. And really, I think of myself as that. Mostly, I am an advocate for the audience or for the patron, and then I'm a co-creator of the thing.
Right. So how did you get into this line of work? I know over the last decade, you've done 18 Broadway shows. You studied theater design. How did this come about?
It's funny that you're from Massachusetts. I'm from Massachusetts. We had to come all the way from there to meet and have this conversation. I was in high school. I was always a real athlete, and I was in high school, kind of dabbling in the drama club and the choir. And I was a musician. I played in the band, so I loved the arts. And I really, really wanted the role of Billy Bigelow, who was the lead character in Carousel. And I tried really hard to prepare. I did prepare very hard for this audition. And I had a tragically awful experience happen in which I was not cast as the lead, as Billy Bigelow.
I'm sorry.
And the drama professor said, but I was cast as Jigger Cragen, who is the bad guy, because it was obviously typecasting. It was a bad guy. And he's the second male lead. And she said, you should think about joining the math teacher, who's the guy that built the sets. And I, in my horrible egotistical brain, thought, if I take the second male lead and I add, you know, building the scenery to those, you know, those two things might add up to be better than the male lead. So I went and I checked it out. And when I went to school, when I graduated, and I enjoyed that process of helping build the scenery. When I went to college, I knew I never wanted to have a audition experience again. But I was in love with the arts. So a professor of mine said, you should really try and have a professional experience. And I went to Williamstown Theater Festival as an intern, and right away fell deeply in love with the process of making theater. And I was able to see for the first time a trajectory of working professionals and how I could imagine myself as an intern moving forward and progressing and eventually becoming a designer. I didn't really think I was going to become a set designer because I couldn't really imagine that world, but I've always been gutsy enough and crazy enough to not just see myself as one kind of designer, but rather just a design. I realized really early on, as you're driving your car through a parking lot and it's filled with a huge puddle, that parking lot was poorly designed. The drainage of the parking lot was poorly designed. And if you open your eyes to that experience, that every single thing in the world needs to be designed, that was really a big moment for me. So there I was getting a kind of formal education in the theater, but I very quickly saw that every single thing needed to be designed, even if it was terribly designed,
right.
And I thought I could do that, whatever that is.
Right. It's interesting because I talk to a lot of theater designers, and many of your colleagues also work in other fields. David Rockwell does restaurant design. S. Devlin, like you, does opera and pop music. Is that just a financial necessity, or does it fulfill some creative urge?
Well, certainly you can't make a living in the theater, right? So I think that you see a whole lot of slashes. I'm a professor / set designer. But the very first designer that I assisted in New York said to me, I only want to do scripted theater. That's what I want to do. He never tried to do television or any of those things. To me, it was always natural. I think that people have an urge to sniff out other opportunities. I think also in the world of HGTV, and you can go and people are encouraged. 15 or 20 years ago, there wasn't really this thing of Home Depot. You can go pick your paint, learn this process of rag rolling a pattern onto the wall. Design has become really accessible to people, and it's easy. It makes people feel like they can do it. I'm not really sure why we do. There's a fair amount of designers in the theater who don't cross over. Right. It never really made sense to me. I realized I was living in the East Village, and a dear friend of mine who is a Tony Award-winning set designer, and she's incredible. She invited me over to her house and said, will you look at my kitchen? I'm not sure that the refrigerator fits. She had just designed a set with one of the most exquisitely designed kitchens I've ever seen. And she did not have the capacity to measure the refrigerator and the hole in her actual apartment. And I thought, oh, her skills just don't transfer in that way, which was mind-blowing, but true. I've just happily and luckily never had that experience.
Right. So you've worked on such a variety of shows, from Annie to Passing Strange. Do you have to like a show to agree to work on it?
Yes, you have to like a show. I think that my decision-making tactics have changed a little bit over the years, because you just start drawing lines in the sand and say, I'm never going to do a show unless they can support it in this way.
Right.
Then, of course, you erase that line in the sand and you backtrack 7 years and you go back and you do it again. Yes, you have to like it. You do not have to like it the same way a director has to like it. They are, phone off in a room 8 or 10 hours a day for many, many weeks, and it's just different. The attachment and the amount of work that you have to do on a show as a designer is different. But I think you have to find your way in, or people smell that you didn't love it. Right. You have to find what you love about it. And part of what I love about it is the collaboration. Right. Theater artists, I think, are some of the best collaborators in the world in any discipline. And I work with a lot of people in a lot of different types of disciplines, whether it's something like Sotheby's or an advertising firm or all sorts of different things. And people are like, but there are rules, and that, we in the theater throw best idea wins up against the wall, and, for a long time, I might play the role of choreographer in the show, and then pull back and pull away, that kind of thing.
Right. So you had worked with Tommy Kail, who became the director of Hamilton, on Lombardi, and you worked with Lin-Manuel Miranda, who became the writer of Hamilton, on Bring It On. Is that how Hamilton came your way, through these connections, or how did you wind up involved?
Yeah, it's not lost on me that I'm the only person who worked on Hamilton that did not work on In the Heights, the musical In the Heights. Boy, did I get lucky. I was doing Passing Strange at the same time they were doing In the Heights. And those guys are my friends. They are my age. They are my peers. They are my collaborators. And I, like the rest of the world, found out that Hamilton was happening when Lin did that number at the White House. And I saw it go viral on YouTube, and I didn't really want to say anything to him. And I didn't really want to step on the other designers' toes. But Tommy and I had worked a lot. Also the choreographer, Andy Blankenbuehler, who is you know, a member of that core team, and Alex Lacamoire, the musical director. I had worked with all of those guys a lot also. So I happened to be up at New York Stage and Film, which is a place in Poughkeepsie that workshops new plays and sometimes does full productions. And they were doing the first act of Hamilton, which was then called the Hamilton Mixtape. It had no real business thinking about itself as a play or a musical, and I was doing a full production, and I saw Tommy Kail, the director, in the quad, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm working on the show Hamilton, this thing, the mixtape." And I said, "Hey, Tommy, when it comes time to pick a designer, I want to throw my hat into the ring." Cut to a whole year later, I had subsequently worked with Tommy a bunch, and Andy and Alex and Lin, and they were up working on the second half of Hamilton. And I said, you know, it's getting, you know, I think it might be a show. You keep calling it another thing, but I think it might be a show. And Tommy said, yeah. And then they made a deal to do it at the Public Theater, and where I have worked a lot, and I feel as one of my artistic homes. And I said, and I got a phone call to interview for the job, which felt a little bit weird because I think I was in tech with 3 out of the 4 of those guys that I had just mentioned. But I worked incredibly hard preparing for that interview. I mean, I obsessively listened to the music, and I did scene breakdowns and research and all sorts of things. And I usually don't like to do a design contest. I usually don't send over sketches or anything. And I worked really hard, and I did sketches. And I said to Tommy in that meeting, "I'm like the Madison to your Jefferson.
Right.
Like, come on, man. We're like young, scrappy, and hungry. I swear if you don't hire me, I'm not going to throw away my shot." I mean, I did it all, and I got the job.
Right. Congratulations. So how do you, as a design challenge, start to think about, you know, a hip-hop musical about the first Treasury Secretary? What is there to grab onto there in terms of a visual concept?
Well, the cool thing about Hamilton is, other than it being so sprawling, I mean, 52 songs, 25,000 words, you know, epic story that takes place over a sweeping 30 years. Other than those things, it's incredibly fantastic as a designer because you get to research. All of the places existed. So you could go to the places. I could certainly see paintings and etchings and drawings and read unbelievably descriptive accounts of all of these places. And so if I was designing the movie version of it, it was really easy. I brought Lin and Tommy into my office and basically pasted up essentially a picture or some visual representation of every single scene and location of the then, what was then Hamilton script. And then we knew that we would never be able to realistically render each one of these locations on stage because it was a musical that moves seamlessly in and out of time and, you know, all these other things. And we would just never need to be able to wait for the art in that way. So then that's the thing about, one of the beautiful things about theater is we get to work in metaphor and not literal representation. So then it was about trying to find a way to take all of these swirling ideas and kind of melt them down into one big muscular gesture that could serve this incredible show.
Right. Okay, so you have, I guess, 2 central metaphors. You have the double turntables, and you have the physical scaffolding. Can you talk about what's going on in each of those cases?
Yeah, I mean, the turntable, has anyone here seen the show? Okay, pretty good. Facebook Live just blew up. Everyone's seen the show out there. So the show has a turntable and then a donut, a ring on the outside of it. And actually, if you can believe it, in my interview with Tommy, I had drawn a picture of the turntable. And I said, I don't really know why, except that Hamilton was swept off the island of Nevis in this hurricane. There's a cyclical relationship between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. There is this, you know, political storm that he finds himself in. it's a really good theatrical trick to show kind of time passage and a cinematic way to, let's do a turntable. And he was like, yeah, put a pin in that. We had gone all the way down the road of building the set, and we had just started rehearsal, and my brilliant associate, Rod Lemon, who he and I have been working together since we were interns at Williamstown Theater Festival. That's how long I've known him. He was literally my roommate, and we lived in the East Village together. So I've known him forever. He said in a design meeting, how are you going to get the furniture on stage? How are we going to do all these other things? And he said, you should bring back up to Tommy and Andy that idea about the turntable. And I did, and Tommy and Andy, who were resistant to the idea, neither of them had worked on the turntable before, they said, if you can show us 8 or 10 different examples of where we would use it in the show, we will think about it. And so I jotted down what we call the Aaron Sorkin walk and talk, where Burr meets the Schuyler sisters, a moment in the duel. I jotted down all these different little versions, and they said, okay. And, you know, I've said this a lot before. Those guys, I gave them Lincoln Logs, and I was expecting them to build a cabin, and they are really smart and incredibly great collaborators, and they came back and had built a rocket ship, you know. And it was amazing. It was like I had this impulse, that this idea that we could do all sorts of cool things, and then they brought it into rehearsal and made really cool things. Right. The second part of your question, the kind of scaffolding, I knew we were doing the show at the Public Theater at the Newman, which is a beautiful brick room. And I knew that making scenery felt wrong, because the founding fathers and the women whose shoulders we're all standing on are nothing if not real. And so we weren't going to have like a cyc or something that we could light a certain way that could look like a beautiful sky. We were going to try and make it real. So I was going to embrace the bricks around. And then, getting back to that metaphor idea, what I wanted to create was a space that felt aspirational and half-built and under construction, and a space that felt like we are telling the story not of the people who built our country, but on the people who built the scaffolding from which our country was built. And so our set design is a version of the scaffolding that is holding up the very foundation of this thing. And you know, this is a thing that I've talked about before, but between Act 1 and Act 2 of Hamilton, we actually fly in 8-foot sections of wall to show progress of the set being built. No one sees this at all. They are busy buying merchandise or going to the bathroom or whatever it is, but this is an example of a very, very subtle design eyelash as opposed to the jawbone of the set. A little eyelash that we add because I feel like every single detail, even if you can't see it happen, adds up to an overall experience, a subconscious experience. When you come back and you sit in your seat and you think, is there something different? It feels heavier. It feels more substantial. It is. We've added to it. And it's something that we know as the creative team. And I believe that if one person in the audience out of every 1,300 people that see it a night feel that, it's important. But I think people understand and feel the massing subconsciously. And that's a very interesting way to attach to the work.
So when you're working on something like either Hamilton or the exhibit here at Sotheby's, do you get a voice in how your design concept is translated into marketing? Do you, the overall visual branding of the thing you're working on, do you play a role in those discussions?
Yeah, and more, because I think I've let my collaborators know that I'm interested in that. You know, in 2001, I co-founded a theater company, mainly because I had been asked to build and paint and prop and production manage and all these things. And the person I founded it with had been asked to direct and cast and set the schedule and stage manage. And we combined together to make a theater company. And we thought about the branding and the marketing and what the ticket looked like. And I've always been really interested in the holistic journey of someone. When you go to a piece of theater or you come to Sotheby's, your attachment to Sotheby's didn't start at the front door. It started with that email, or it started with a mailer, or it started with a billboard, or up the side of a bus. And you can't separate yourself from the branding and the experience. And I think that You know, there's that thing about advertising. I think it's 6 points of contact kind of convince someone to go see something. So if it's a show, it's, hey, I saw the show last night. Oh, yeah, I got a postcard. I saw that billboard. I saw the ad in the Times. And then it becomes part of your consciousness. I think that it would be foolish for a producer or some producing entity to not include the creative people in all of those decisions. You know, if you look at the Sotheby's Americana Week graphic over there on that, there are those little strings on it. Those were a late addition, and you know, thankfully and happily, Sotheby's included me. And David Goodman actually said we should try and get those strings on every single piece of material that we're creating, so that there's a kind of cohesive experience. And so more and more, I'm asking for it, and more people are really receptive to it.
Right. Huh. Do you, I know with theater especially, often you start with a small budget. Many of the shows that you've worked on have a life either off-Broadway or in a regional theater. So you don't have a ton of money, but you have to make something that can be scaled up should the show make it. How do you do that?
Well, I always start with no budget in my mind. I always start with it's a zillion dollars and we can get anything we want.
Right.
And I always start with no timeline, and I always start not thinking about it like a designer.
Right. This is the flag around the building.
This is it. I just think, like, what would I want to do, and what does my collaborator want to try and achieve, and forget about money. I think part of that, I think one of the reasons why I'm fairly successful at doing that is because I have a really technical mind. And I spent all of these years having to build my own stuff, literally, by hand. So I'm not one of these people who says, I think it should be all red and then all blue, and not have 4 technical ways that I could suggest that this could actually get done. Because, you know, by the time I had left those really, really important years at Williamstown, I had built 100 regional theater size shows and been on those crews. So I have a lot of confidence in my actual technical engineering and carpentry skills. So I can toe the line in a pretty interesting way where I can say, yeah, I think we should wrap the building, but then I can say, and here are the rigging points, and here's the kind of material and the rigging material that we're going to need to do that, and here's the material that would need to be made so that it, you know, and I can just go. I just don't let myself think about the budget. I let myself then, once we come up with a really good idea, distill it down to the essence of the idea. So we want the flag wrapping the building, but we can't do that. We can't afford it, we don't have time, we can't do it. What is what was the essence of that idea? It was the flag, because I wanted it to be set against some sort of an abstract representation of patriotism, and then you eventually distill it into something that we can achieve.
Right. So is there one object in this collection that you would like to take home?
Yes. There is one. I just am torn whether I should say it because don't say it. Don't say it. Yes, there's one. Talk to me about it on Thursday.
Wow.
Bidding war. Bidding war.
All right, bidders. Do you all have questions for us? And if there are questions from Facebook, let us know.
David, I'm curious, just your homework for the Hamilton set. Were there particular historical images that had an impact on you? Because you said that you immediately left to a kind of more metaphorical approach.
I guess we should repeat the question. And this is Ron Chernow, who wrote the book from which Hamilton is adapted. Congratulations.
Yes, he deserves a major round of applause.
And he asks if there were, given all the research that you did for Hamilton, were there particular objects or things that you saw that helped inform your design?
It's funny. I remember asking Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, about what the Hitsville home was like in Detroit. I had been to the museum, I had seen the home, and I, was sitting there asking the guy that made it, what was it like? About the design specifically, and he explained to me about a stoop and about the people and about the clothes and about the feeling in the clubs and about nothing about the design. He said nothing about the design. I said, yeah, but what was Studio A like? And he talked to me about what it was like to meet Diana Ross. Nothing about the design. So when you ask me that question, I can, in my head, and I have a pretty good memory, file through my mental Rolodex and think about all of those visual images. And the one that came to my mind had nothing to do with the scenery. And it is the picture, it's the portrait of Hamilton in a green jacket. Which, if you see the show, he spends a fair amount of time in a green jacket, and it was his favorite color, and it's the color of money. And I remember the conversation between Paul Towswell, the costume designer, myself, Tommy Kail, the director, and Andy Blankenbuehler, the choreographer, about what these guys and these men and women were going to wear. And we had to make a real choice because it was a hip-hop musical, and we were, for a moment, going to set it in contemporary clothing. And I had designed a set that was glossy black and steel and a double-decker structure and very modern because we thought it could run parallel to the storytelling. And that one piece of research led in my mind, I connected the dots to that one conversation where we decided the way that we're going to cast this company, which is going to be what America looks like today, would be far enough storytelling-wise from what the Founding Fathers looked like then that we had to try and be real. But that picture, Ron, that portrait, to me, unlocked everything. And then the set design was like, yeah, it's going to be brick and it's going to be wood and it's going to be all these other things, but it's going to be real and it's going to be period. And so of all the things, that portrait was the one because we thought, can you imagine Christopher Jackson, an African-American man, playing George Washington? And wouldn't it be amazing not to see him in high tops, but to see him in George Washington's regalia, like fully decked out as General Washington, and that would be the real amazing visual, visceral impact. So it's that picture.
Can I just follow up with a quick question about your use of color? Because I was looking at your website. A lot of what you've done is incredibly brightly hued. You look here, obviously, at Sotheby's, you embraced red, white, and blue. The Hamilton set is almost devoid of color. Why is that?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people said to me when I made the Hamilton set, oh, well, it's just brick and it's just wood. And I, in fact, just said that. We went through 33 different variations of brick color and wood color to get that brick color.
Right.
We had to take into consideration the costumes, the complexions of the performers, the lighting gel, tons of things. So, you know, it's never that simple. So it's the set is not the star of Hamilton. You know, I had to try and find a way to wrestle this insanely genius, crazy work to the ground and serve every single location with the least amount that I possibly could do and then get the hell out of its way. Right. And so the color, it was not about the color. It was about the texture and it was about the making the performers and the words the star.
Right. Yes, sir. Why don't you wait for the microphone so that people on Facebook can hear you?
I don't have a whole lot of money, so I'm not investing in Broadway plays. But if somebody came to me and said, you know, do you want to invest in a Broadway play? It's going to be hip-hop music about Alexander Hamilton. I said, what on earth are you talking about? Did you have any sense that this would be as successful as it is?
No one, you know, you can't imagine that it would be the juggernaut that it is, right? That's, you know, people talk about the best ever. Was Michael Jordan the best player ever, or was LeBron James? Like, you can talk about that all day. I've stopped trying to handicap whether it will be successful or not. I knew when I read it and when I heard the music that I loved it. That was the first thing. And I knew that Lynn is really smart and really talented, and I had faith in this creative team, but it's a perfect storm of a lot of things. You know, you never really know something's going to get love letters from the press and the intelligentsia and pop culture and everyman and government figures and are going to like fall in love with it, and then it's going to become like a late night darling and all the other things. So no one knows that, and it doesn't always equate to financial success. because I've been parts of shows that got incredibly amazing reviews that closed. This happens to be a bowl of porridge that is so piping hot that everyone wants to eat it, and that's great. I knew it was really, really good, but I didn't know it was going to become like a lightning. You know, it's like you've got Harry Potter and Star Wars and the iPhone and Hamilton. You know, like it's cut, right?
Yeah. Do we need mics, or I can repeat the question?
If and when this is ever translated to lens, through the lens, and anything is possible, would you do it in a strictly historic set, or what you must be thinking about?
Right. So the question is, if Hamilton were adapted as a movie, would you want to rethink the design to do it in period, or would you stick with something more abstract?
Most of the time when theater is made into a film, frankly, it's because the show is in some way, has it run its course as a theatrical enterprise. To get a couple more years out of the stage show or whatever that is. I think that, first of all, that's a Lynn's decision whether he wants to make it into a movie, and he's been pretty candid about the fact that he likes the play version of it, and doesn't really imagine it becoming a film anytime soon. And if I am still alive when the show is struggling and they want to make a movie, I'm sure that the technology will be such that we could do all sorts of interesting things. But I feel like part of what makes it special is, designing is redesigning and writing is rewriting, and Ron's book is an incredible document. One of the magical things that Lynn and Tommy did was what they left out of the story. I mean, if you read that book and then you watch the musical and you go and look at the letters on the second floor, they all, speak in, they're all having a conversation, but they left huge parts of the story out to make the show. And, I just think that as it exists as a piece of theater is a really beautiful effort. And I think we're a long way away from the film. Probably people will be like stepping inside film by the time they make it.
Right. All right, who else? Yes. There's a mic coming to you.
Thank you. I had the privilege of taking Chris Jackson through Mount Vernon when he was preparing for his role as George Washington. And I'm wondering if you could speak just a little bit about the relationship, if you think there is one, between the preservation of specific historic sites like Hamilton or the Grange and creative enterprises like Hamilton.
Well, I mean, I think that trying to preserve any and all of our history is incredibly important. And it's funny, I think that people get so caught up in our country and from whence we have come. And if anyone has traveled around the world, you realize that we really are the adolescents of the world. Parts of Asia have been around for thousands of years, in Europe obviously longer than we have, and we're brand new. We're only 270 years old or 240 years old. I'll do the math. And we kind of behave like we're the crazy adolescents also. I think it's, and even I grew up on the East Coast. There are pretty old buildings here. You go to the West Coast, there are not as old buildings. When Hamilton created the Electoral College, he had no idea that people would sprawl from the East Coast to the West Coast in the way that we have. So I think it's really, really important to hold and maintain these things. That was one of the things when I came and saw those letters, and I made that joke earlier about the Russian Tsar. It's insane to think that we're not going to, I hope that we do, maintain all of those letters in this country. I feel like they are certainly born and raised in America, and I would like to think that they are preserved respectfully, and kept in a condition so that we could revisit them when the next person that owns them, when they come up for sale again, that they are intact. I think it's really important to maintain our history. And if you travel around, you see that, we've made all sorts of crazy decisions, knocking down, beautiful buildings to build ugly buildings.
Right. Let me just follow up on that. I know many members of the cast have gone to many of these sites. I know that Leslie Odom Jr. and Lin-Manuel Miranda went to the dueling ground. I know that the women who played the Schuyler sisters went to a Schuyler home in New Jersey, there's been quite a bit of kind of early cast pilgrimages to the sites that are alluded to in the show. Why is that helpful for the performers? What do you think they get from that?
Well, I think it's probably akin to when I held those letters. That, there's just a difference between looking at something in a two-dimensional picture or in a documentary and being there. Also, oftentimes these places are staffed with incredibly knowledgeable, passionate people that can share tidbits about what was going on or why you would use something that looked like that. And I actually invited a lot of the members of the current cast of Hamilton, past and present cast of Hamilton, to come see these papers. This is what we call a champagne problem, when you can continue your character development work even once the show is open. Usually once the show is open, we freeze it. You don't really deal with it. But every single night, a live show is different. And, we had a new president get elected. People in the cast had a real reaction, positive or negative, to that. All sorts of things happen in the world, and so getting a chance to invite them to see these letters and interact with the real McCoy.
Right.
I watched Javier, who is the current Hamilton on Broadway, bawl his eyes out when he held that document, some of these documents downstairs, and you can't unring that bell. He saw a letter. It happened to be a description of a place that was close to Hamilton that is also talked about in the show. And he said to me, I'm going on stage in like 4 hours, and I'm going to imagine this place in a different way. It's something that Lynn didn't know what it looked like, and here it is downstairs. And it's just an incredible thing to be able to continue to develop your character. I know that they were very excited to be able to interact with history on a more real level.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. There's a letter from Philip to his dad.
The character development. So this letter from Philip is, Dear Papa. He speaks to his dad about wanting to be a good man, about preparing a 4th of July speech. It's the only, by the way, known letter that Philip wrote to his father, or the only kept letter in existence. He is preparing a speech. He shows it to a professor of his at King's College. The professor reads it, encourages him to cut one of the sentences, in which Philip in the letter says, you remember the sentence, Papa. It's the one that starts like this, da, 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 da. It's my favorite sentence. So you learn so much about dad and son and their relationship, because he's obviously shared with Hamilton this letter, the speech, and they've bonded over the fact they both love the sentence. And then, it's so incredible. Then it's sealed with red wax, which of course, when it was ripped open, it looks kind of like, this is Selby, who tells the story, who is the head of manuscripts and letters at Sotheby's. He tells the story how it feels so dramatic, but when it's open, it's like blood red, and it has like 2 holes in it, and you can't help but drawing a parallel to, the duel. Both of those men in the letter, involved in the letter, were shot and killed in duels, and it's just this unbelievable thing, and it's downstairs as we speak,
right.
And it's the only letter, and it's so sweet.
Yeah. Who else? And if there are questions from Facebook, we're open to those too.
Sure. So we have 2 more questions. The first one is going to come from Facebook. Erica wants to know, David, what is it that you personally collect?
That's an excellent question.
I personally collect experiences and collaborations. And I mean that seriously. I don't, I spend so much of my day creating and sculpting space for people and experiences for people that, my apartment is spare. I live a version of a monkish existence in which I only kind of have things in my home that I touch and interact with every day. I've got a coffee maker that I love, and a couch and a coffee table in which I put my feet up on that coffee table, and I basically live like that. But I collect these human experiences and these collaborations which really do give me life and, direction.
And was there another one from Facebook, or should we take it from the audience? Yes.
Hey, David, this question's for you. What was your perception of Sotheby's prior to working with them, and how have they been as a partner?
That's a loaded question because I've been talking about that. I've been talking about this for the last 7 months. I thought, like many people, I think, that Sotheby's was a place where rich people came to buy expensive stuff. And it is, but it's also an incredibly accessible, warm, welcoming space with a beautiful cafe on the top floor. And one of the things that David Goodman said to me in our first conversation was, come check it out. Like, I'm trying to infuse the whole building and the whole physical plant with new life, new blood, interesting people. And there was a sale up of kind of contemporary furniture, and the stuff was like $2,000, $3,000, $7,500. It really took me by surprise. And so I've been telling everyone, come check it out. The people that take your coat downstairs and the people that at the information desk are incredibly warm and welcoming. And, I don't find myself often at this location on the Upper East Side here, but certainly it's a place that I would more frequently stop by now, having had this experience. And I feel like there's something here kind of for everything, including at the Americana sale. You have to kind of like zoom in on individual pieces and not get like, don't let the meditation of all 1,300 pieces wash over you. There's like a bowl here for everybody.
Wow. That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for doing this, Michael.
David.
Thank you.
And please see David Korins' exhibition and all the pieces. And we invite you to stay for the reception. Floors 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all open, and please stay. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks again, guys.